Welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, a Baxter Professional Services production. Hi, and welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we're experts in nursing and experts in business. My name is Tina Baxter, and I'm your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. Today's show is how one nurse launched a solutions-based business to combat workplace violence. And our guest today is Mel Cortez. My mission is for you to own your seat at the table of nurse entrepreneurship, gaining confidence, skills, and freedom to live your life on your own terms. I specialize in working with nurses and other health professionals who want to reduce burnout, pessimism, and compassion fatigue. So you can become a successful entrepreneur to reclaim the love you have for your profession and to create a fulfilling and prosperous life. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at thenurseSharkAcademy.biz and come feel the sun, providing a clear path for business success. And welcome to the Nurse Shark Academy Show. I'm Tina Baxter, your host. The Nurse Shark Academy Show highlights nurse business owners and others in the healthcare field who promote entrepreneurship. We interview nurse leaders and encourage them to tell their story. Today's guest is Mel Cortez, or Mel Cortez, of Cortex Gold. Welcome to the show, Mel. And this is a little bit about her. She's an RN entrepreneur, graduated from Towson University with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. She's been a critical care travel nurse for over 10 years, and she's been in many facilities across the country. In addition to being a nurse supervisor in acute care, she's had various management positions in home health, hospice, and long-term care prior to returning to the bedside to serve as a critical care traveler in March of 2020. Mel also has launched her Cortex Brand, a solution-based business that she'll be happy to tell us more about. So I wanted to say thank you for coming on the show, and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Tina. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about business and nursing, my two favorite things. So I am Mel. I was an ICU traveler. I'm still an ICU nurse. I still work at the bedside. I try and do my one shift a month, even though it kind of kills me at this point. But I think that if we all leave the experienced staff, then, you know, those new nurses and novice nurses are really missing out on some key elements of professionalism and just tactics that we can teach them. So I try to keep that up, even though I am now running my business. Cortex Gold is a consulting company, and I mostly focus on helping to bridge the gap between clinical and security. So I really enjoy working with organizations and individual security directors or clinical nurse leads to run and organize their workplace violence initiatives. So and that is on our for-profit side. And our nonprofit side, we just launched the first collaborative effort to produce a workplace violence textbook that will allow us to train students, as well as the active 20.9 million active healthcare workers that are at the bedside currently, and gain research from the different trials that we're going to attempt. So it's been a really awesome experience, and I definitely have my experience as a nurse to say thank you to, because I don't think without my nursing experience I would have been able to do any of this, not just because of the niche and the area that I'm working, but because of the ability to just prioritize and pivot and innovate. Nurses make excellent entrepreneurs, as you know.
That is so much to unpack, and you're right. And first off, congratulations on the nonprofit. I'm looking forward to discussing that with you further. But I wanted to circle back a little bit before we get into that. Tell me about your nursing journey, because I'm always fascinated to know how nurses got into the career. How did you choose nursing as your career? So how did you become a nurse?
So I never wanted to be a nurse. I actually never even really knew a nurse growing up. So but when I was looking at colleges, my dad was like, hey, if you want help with school, you're going to pick one of these top 10 up and coming careers in Forbes magazine, and nursing was one of them. Healthcare was one of them. So I had kind of toyed with the idea of being a physician's assistant, and then went to nursing school at Towson University. Little did I know it was like the hardest degree possible, Bachelor of Science in nursing. And I'm terrible at math, terrible at studying. Wasn't the best student. I'm sure that if my nursing professor saw me now, they would be like, no freaking way, like not that one. But I really fell in love with critical care. I started as a CNA. So I worked as a CNA all through nursing school. And I attribute that to a lot of my assessment skills and like my ability to just connect with the patient. And so after that, I worked in the ICU doing that and floated through a community hospital. And then when I became a nurse, I started off on cardiac step down. Like at that time, we had like 5 to 6 patients. Some of them had sheaths. Like it was a little bit crazy where I was at, in rural North Carolina. And so then I came back to Baltimore and worked as an ICU nurse and got my first like big nursing job, And back then, like it was hard to get an ICU nurse job. Like you did not get a job as a new nurse in the ICU. Like you didn't get it. And then even if you had some years of experience, it was very competitive and they were like, the tip of the sword. So it's a different time.
So enjoying that time as a CNA, right? Because you get the chance to learn a lot. And for those of you that may not be nurses yet, maybe you are a CNA and you're listening to the podcast, that's a great way to get into the profession because you've already had that experience of talking to a resident or a patient. You already have the experience of giving someone a bath and getting into that intimate space and all those different things that you do. So it makes you a little bit more comfortable when you get into the clinical setting. And I started as a CNA too.
Did you?
I was a CNA in long-term care.
Ooh,
that was my first.
Girl, that's so hard. I could not. The only time I did long-term care, I was a DON. And I ended up being a CNA half the time because we didn't have any staff. But that's hard. That's a hard job. Getting them up every morning, getting them dressed, getting them into breakfast, knowing who's who and what shoe goes with who. I don't know.
Yep, I did that for several years and all through nursing school.
Wow.
I started out as a CNA because I needed a job. And they were willing to pay you as you learned. And this is me after my bachelor's degree in biology. I was finishing that up and decided not to go to medical school and didn't know what else to do with myself.
Wow.
And so that's how I became a CNA because I needed a job. And I thought, I can do this till I figure out what I'm going to do with my life because I didn't want to move back home. And got started and saw what the nurses did and thought, well, if they can do that, I can do that. And that's how I got into nursing school. I just called them up and said, hey, let me in. And they did. That never happens, okay? I don't tell anyone to do that.
I did not get into nursing school the first time. I applied and I did not get in. And that's because I spent too much time socializing in college. So I ended up having to reapply, and I reapplied at a satellite campus that was just opening up. So they needed people. So I did get in there. It was still pretty competitive, but I did get in there, and I moved far away and lived in the boonies for 2 years, just me and my little dog, and did my schooling. So.
Yeah, my experience was completely not that. I was a transfer student. I was finishing my BA in biology. I called them up 2 weeks before the semester started and said, I want to transfer. Let me in. Wow. And they said, well, you have to get accepted into the university first. I was like, done. Here's my transcripts, blah, blah, blah. I get in, they're like, now you have to get accepted to the School of Nursing. And they were like, we'd love to have you because you have a biology degree, a background, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how I got in 2 weeks before the semester started. I just called them and said, let me in. Same thing with grad school.
Wow.
I happened to know the dean of the school at the time. I had sat on, this is where it's important for students. This is where you should have those experiences and take advantage of them. I was on the Student Nurses Association board, and I was the student rep to sit on the state Nurses Association board.
Oh, that's great. That's such good
So,
experience. And
yes.
oh, that's awesome. I had no idea. That's cool. I was like one of the vice presidents of my nursing class or whatever, but that's like,
Yeah.
10 people is not a big deal. But I think that that type of experience is absolutely wonderful. I think nurses need to do more of that earlier. And I
Yes.
think more nurses need to start businesses so that we can understand the business of healthcare, because you can't fix something unless you know how it works. So if you
Mhm.
only know what's like kind of at the end result, you don't know how it all begins. You don't know how it's structured. And I think that's why those folks that are advancing their education and doing things like that are really important. Me, I'm just not a student. I was like, either I have to go back to school and get a master's degree and like pull my hair out, or I could just do my own thing. I'll make
Well,
up my own thing.
but each of those experiences are so valid. You mentioned being in management, and having that experience of being supervision and management taught you how to manage other people. But in my experience, and I'm pretty sure yours is similar, it also showed you how things work at a policy level in the hospital, and why some of the decisions are made that are made, that a lot of nurses that are just at the bedside may not understand.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, so middle management, I say is
Hmm.
the absolute hardest job that
Yes.
exists in healthcare, nurse managing, because you are stuck in this box and you can't do anything this way and you can't do anything this way. So you have no revenue power. You're like a CEO of a mini thing with no funding and no power. And it is
Hmm.
the most frustrating experience. But those who do it well are very creative and very innovative. And that's one of the things that I think helped me build the business that I have today, is that I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it, like in this sick way, I enjoyed trying to figure out how to get them to say yes and them to say no. Like I was like, how
Yes.
do I get everybody to work together, and one of the ways to do that is really to find some common ground. And I think that when I went to approach security and healthcare security, I saw that there was a lot of common ground missing. And it wasn't for the fault of either side. It was just a lack of concentration in that area. And I think that's what I bring to the industry, is that's all that I focus on, right? I don't focus on threat assessments. I don't focus on things over here. I just focus on how can I bridge these two things together to help support these healthcare systems.
Well, that's an important aspect, and that gives us a great segue to talking a little bit more about your business, because as we've seen, if you've watched the news, there's been nurses assaulted on their units. You've had a doctor get shot, and all these different things that are happening. That's around the country. And the sad thing is, it's not just in the U.S., but we're seeing
It's
healthcare
very
violence
global.
rise, yes, around the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk to a little bit about that and how your program helps?
Yeah, so that's what I was seeing, and I was trying to decide, is it really the violence increasing or the media coverage? And since I'm still at the bedside, I can 100% speak for the fact that there are several things that are causing the increase in violence. There are no longer nurse experts left. So there are professional patients at this point because of the opioid epidemic and all the other things that are happening. These patients now are frequent, they're sick, they know the rigmarole. When they
Yep.
have a new nurse that doesn't, they can tell.
Hmm.
And so they have a lack of trust, they have a lack of um, belief in the system, and then the system's issues on top of it, right? So one of the things that we do is help support nurses all over the globe. I have someone on the team that's from Pakistan, someone from Singapore, someone from Australia, the UK, South Africa, everywhere you can imagine, right? Canada. So those folks bring their tailored issues that are not similar to America. And we kind of use the things that they're doing in the UK as a pivot point. It's not something that we want to replicate because American market, American structure is much different, but it is something that can help support us because they do have a lot of innovations and they have stricter standards, especially when it comes to behavioral health. because they have a behavioral health track. When you become a nurse, you can specialize. You have to specialize at the beginning of nursing school what type of nurse you want to be. So you don't just do your general nursing and then become something when you're out there. So what we offer is a program that allows them to understand how to reconnect with a patient. A lot of the nurses that are training were nurses in the pandemic when there was no compassion because everyone was dying anyway and you were too busy. So they didn't learn the skill set that older nurses have. And then they didn't learn a high degree of professionalism. So there is a way to establish yourself as an expert rapidly with someone. And that is by being knowledgeable about what you're doing. So I tell people all the time, before you go into the room, the most important thing you can do is, remember who you are, right? You start with who you are. And part of that is understanding how your emotions are and where you're at, where your head's at, really kind of come back into your body. We use the breath as an anchor. So you take a deep breath when you're about to knock on the door. And we kind of recenter and focus ourselves, right? From a neuroscience perspective, we go into that portion and that emotional regulation. Because once we go into the room and we do have someone that's exhibiting some challenging behaviors, we have to be emotionally stoic. We have to be able to connect, but not to react, right? And a lot of these companies that I was seeing were teaching like, oh, set limits and disconnect from the patient and like, just don't engage, don't take it personally. Well, when someone says a racial slur to me, I take that pretty personally. And as a human, that's okay. And I should be allowed to have that feeling in that moment of being like, okay, ow. And then how do I process and move through those things? And what's the next step to do that rapidly so I don't end up becoming a victim, right? And so that perspective, when you provide that type of training and that intimate of experiences and simulations, you are really connecting with the staff and you're creating a culture shift. A lot of these other training programs out there are giving great de-escalation tips or great, things, but they don't connect to a healthcare worker because they don't understand the climate. And we are the most resistant to change. And in order for us to shift and to change, we have to have things that are relatable and things that we can connect our brains to, because our brains are already full. So that's why we modeled it off of CPR and ACLS. So what's the model that they know? How can we approach it from a way that they aren't feeling defensive? And then how can we heal them a little bit and then give them the tools and the tips, which it is. Instead of saying, watch your tone, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. It's more like, hey, I understand that you feel that way and it's valid. And this is terrible that we even have to have this conversation right now. But you are a professional and this is professionalism, and you are a nurse and you went through school and you're smart and your degree is the hardest in the world. And, you have the ability to establish yourself as an expert, even if it's day one, because I guarantee you looked at that chart and you know what their diagnosis is. And if you got to go in and tell them that lab is there, or you got to draw some labs, you can say, sir, we're monitoring your kidney function. And these are really important because we want your kidney numbers to come down so that we can get you out of here. So this lab is important this morning so that I can tell the doctor when he comes in at 8:00 what we're doing so he can come up with a plan to get you out of here. And I guarantee you use the word get you out of here 3 times and they'll let you do whatever you want.
Yes, exactly.
Or I talk about the food. I'm like, aren't you ready to have some Wendy's? And they're like, yeah, I am. I'm like, okay, let's vibe,
Yes. It's being present, right?
Yes.
Being present with them. And sometimes they say something that's not quite what you want to hear. My background is psychiatry, and so I've heard some things over the years.
I bet.
And I'm like, okay, so what makes you upset in this situation is, and I'm like, help me to understand what you're trying to communicate.
And we script it. How can I help you?
Mm-hmm.
How can I help you is that's the baseline. You walk in the room, how can I help you? And if they can't give you a logical answer, that's your first sign that this patient is probably not negotiable. And I'm talking about in the inpatient areas, in the non-psych areas where the patient is sick, where you've got a heavy patient load outside on the other side, you know, in the ER. This is the type of skill set. We are not a long-term de-escalation over 4 weeks program. Like that
This is to get you safely out the room.
Let's figure out why Buddy Boy wants to pull his eyeballs out with a spoon or whatever. And then, you know, how do we get him to the point where he's safe? And I think those are the things that, like, for instance, restraints. I've been vetting restraint companies for the last 4 years that I've been doing this, and I finally found one that I like. But it's because they're the least restrictive. But they're soft, they're easy to apply, they're washable. They're all the things that like a nurse would want out of a restraint system. Yes. It's not something that, you know, a medical device company came up with because they needed them and then just, you know, sells them. So I think that the innovations that exist now, and the ability for us to leverage the we the people media is what I call it, right? Like we're TikTok is now media. Like we're showing the truth. The media is whatever they're doing. It's like a show. You know that show, The Hunger Games?
Yes.
You know how in the Capitol, like they're all dressed up, and I'm like, that's what the media reminds me of now. I'm like, we're headed there, you know?
Yeah, they don't show you the real. You
right.
You get that in the footage from the shaky camera phone.
Right. And now everybody's going to be filmed. That's why when, you know, there's this big discussion about body cameras and security and whether nurses should have to wear body cameras. And I have my own thoughts on that. And I think, first of all, patients have cameras now. They're going to be filming you, whatever's happening. You know, I think that the capability of the cameras don't do much except record something that's already happening. Right. They're already going to, and then we can look at the footage later and see who's what did what, where, and whatever. But the goal is to even avoid getting in the situation that we require wearing a camera. And sometimes you can't in healthcare, which is why I think that the camera might be a good idea on some options, because sometimes you just can't avoid it. You know, these people are, you know, in a situation where they can't manage their own emotions. They can't emotionally regulate. And sometimes people are just human too, you know, they're just human. And I think that that's one of the things that in security, we have to understand that we're not in the same environment as you would be in another policing environment or somewhere where you have pure authority, you know, and you have a gun and a badge and all these things. We are not those people. And one of the times that I was most violently assaulted was because when the officers were there, they were using pain techniques to keep him compliant. Right. And then when they left, we watched it, and then we were, you know, the bad guys because we let them hurt him, and then we became the target, you know. So people are pretty upset at me sometimes when I'm like, we don't teach pain tactics. They're like, you have to, that's self-defense. And I'm like, okay, if you're in the point where you're needing to use a pain tactic with someone, we've already passed the point of where you shouldn't be there as a nurse. Like, and what are the things that we have to do from a policy standpoint to support that? And so that's kind of the thing that being a nurse manager and then going out and studying and being part of these organizations and just reading as much literature as I could for the last 4 years. I worked a lot of night shift. I worked a lot of night shift, and I did a lot of fucking reading. Like, I read a lot. So people are like, she's not an expert. I'm like, well, I probably read enough to make me at least be able to innovate in my lane. And I do my best to stay in my lane. I don't pretend to know something that I don't. And I think that's sometimes where nurses who are in business get themselves off track, is just because they have an RN, they think that they can speak on a topic that they really aren't an expert on, or they haven't spent the time to learn. And I think that leads to this perception of like poorly business-minded nurses. When in reality, it's just they haven't spent the time and attention to learn those things in that niche. So when you pick your niche, pick something that you really enjoy and that gets you jazzed up. You know, don't just pick Botox because it sounds like you're going to make a lot of money, because you only make money if you have clients. And the only way people want to come and let you put needles in their face is if you're jazzed up about it.
Exactly. I looked at a lice removal business. I researched I heard about it on a podcast. I thought this
You
is
like
great.
picking lice or something?
No, it was this nurse was doing it and she was making a lot of money and she bought into this franchise and it sounded so interesting. And I researched, I said, we only have two of this franchises in our state. It'd be a perfect niche. And then when I got looking
My
at
head's itching, Tina. My head's itching.
yeah, I was like, I don't like head lice.
It's so funny that I will go in the room with the trauma patient with like HIV, but you tell me that there's a bed bug in there, I'm like,
yeah, see, yeah. Yeah, I'm like, there's two things I one of the biggest things I can't do is a GI bleeds.
oh, you know the smell of a GI bleed. That is one
and sputum. Sputum. I love
you know
my
what? A lot of
respiratory
nurses that have
therapist.
trouble with sputum also have trouble with the GI bleed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have trouble with any of it, really. I'm just
like give me the maggoty.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I don't do maggots. Skin flakes really freak me out. I don't like that when you push on the bed, it's like a cloud of foliage.
Yeah.
Okay, that's super gross. Anyway,
don't worry. I plan to put a little disclaimer on this.
All the non-nurses had to sit through that. To the rest of you, we're here. We got you.
Hey, you're talking to the person that would attend an autopsy and then go have lunch, okay?
Oh, yes. That sounds great, though. Did we figure out how they died?
We were students, and so we would go. I worked at the medical college in high school through a summer program, and so
you're so cool. You've done like the coolest stuff ever.
The pathologist would come get me and say, "Hey, I got a new autopsy. Come watch," and I'd watch it. And they showed me all these cool things. And then me and my friends would go eat lunch because we're like, man, I'm hungry after that.
Are you involved with your state organization there at all?
Yes.
I was going to say, you should be. You're perfect for it. You're very good at it. And I think we need more. I am not. Nobody's going to put me up in front of anything official. Okay. Who knows what the hell's going to come out of my mouth? But that's why I have my own business. And I tell people I'm like the Gary V of healthcare security. I just I'll tell you the truth. I've been on a meeting with somebody who had like alert badges. I was like, I never wore your badge. I was like, I hated it. It's too heavy. They were like, oh, okay. I'm like, but here are the things you can do to make it better,
I was thinking about that. I wish we could have a badge where they would track where you are in the hospital at all times, and it would log how many times you go in and out of a patient's room.
They do have that,
and spit out a log, because I think that would help us.
And people hated it because you like go to the bathroom or the break room. They'd be like, why are you spending 15 minutes in the break room 4 times a day? I'm serious. That's what happened with it. And it was like, okay, this was supposed to be a tracker, a location device that turned off call lights. But then because of toxic leadership, it became something that no one wanted to wear or use. And so that's why we don't have these, badges. And now, there's a company called Quema, and it's made by this young entrepreneur that I just love. He's amazing. And he's from, he's going to kill me that I don't know this. I think he's from South Africa or Africa. And he has this badge. It looks like a badge reel. And you just push and hold it. You can push it and it'll send an alert via phone and all kinds of stuff to the people that need help and your phone. It's cool. So for lone workers, inpatient, and it's like a couple bucks per badge, and the battery never dies. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, you guys are so cool, Yeah,
we need something like that, because I hear the stories about the nurses that get cornered somewhere. They're in the stairwell. Nobody knows where they are. They're there for hours. Years ago, we had a physician have an asthma attack and die in her car.
Oh my God.
It wasn't found for like 3 days.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think the thing is that people don't use the alert badges that exist. And it's because they don't have training. They just hand them to you and then they're like, yeah. So like these, for instance, our training is when you say, how can I help you? You put your hands, one hand up, one hand here. So if you feel threatened, you look like you're playing with your badge. And you can even do this, like you're going to show them who you are. How can I help you? I'm Mel. And then as you're putting it back, you're pushing your button.
Mm-hmm.
Because now someone's on the way, because your spidey senses, intuition is always right. If you talk to like some of the best yacht raw threat assessor people that I have on the team, like one of them is Mr. Michael Hovelman. He founded SpaceX security program. He's a Blackwater operator, former CIA. I mean, these people are amazing, right? I can't even tell them a fib, right? I'm like, oh, I was running late. They're like, yeah, right. You just didn't do what you're supposed to do on time. I'm like, how'd you know that? They're like, personality profiling, you know? So I meet with them, we talk about all this stuff, I run things by them, what would you do in this scenario, yada yada, and then they innovate and they develop things that they would have done from a protection standpoint instead of a policing standpoint. So protection is more of like preventing something from happening and keeping an asset safe. Policing is like going out and preventing crime, or, you know, keeping things from happening to other people. So when we look at, for instance, canine, people are always like, oh my gosh, you can't have pointy-eared canines in healthcare. And I'm like, but they're not police dogs. They're not the type of dog where you let off the leash and they hear the sirens and they're going to go eat something, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're the type of dog that could sit next to you, and if somebody started escalating or somebody started getting really combative, the dog will bark. Just bark. Doesn't move. Just bark. Hey, we're here. We're watching you. You're okay. And that's enough sometimes to just people, oh, okay, never mind. Like that's not, I'm not doing that today.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
and I always say, like, the dog is the nurse's voice, you know, and a voice that's a little bit louder, a little bit different tone, but they're a voice for us when the patient doesn't listen because they don't see us as an authority figure.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's so interesting having worked inpatient, and you can kind of tell when somebody's escalated, except in this one case where I got socked in the eye by a Huntington's patient out of the blue. And then I was handing him a cookie. He socked me in the eye, took his cookie and sat down.
Right.
Right. I'm like, what happened?
So happy. That is happened before. Yeah. And they're just like, bam. And you're like, oh my God. And then they're like, thank you. And then and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. I'm like,
you can't even be upset at them at that point. And that's kind of where the training really comes in. Like, is there a pattern of this? Are we passing it off in report?
Mm-hmm.
Where are your hands at all times? What are their fists doing? What are their neck and their eyes and their jaw doing? Those type of things are things that EP guys, executive protection professionals, are watching for people all the time. So they're the things that now we can teach because nurses are assessing too. So it's just a matter of adding a little bit more data into their assessment. And then they'll be very successful. But I think nurses have a really vast skill set, and that, you know, to pivot a little bit towards entrepreneurship. But when you're looking at building a business, a lot of people, I would say too, like, if you haven't failed a business once, like you're not really doing it. Like, your business you should start something, it should fail, you should start another thing, and you pivot. And I feel like that's a really great way to learn, unless you have unlimited funding to like put towards everything that you need and hire yourself somebody to help you. But most of us don't have that. You know, most of us in healthcare are really just innovators. Like, they want to create a solution. You know, Dr. Slishman, he's a ER physician that created a splinting system to pull traction. And then he was sitting in his garage one day thinking about the shootings, and he has an 8-year-old or a young kid. And he was like, I wonder if we could wrap these, because they were getting the kids coming from these shootings where the tourniquets were placed, and either they were placed wrong and they weren't doing anything and they were bleeding out, or they were placed inappropriately and kids were losing limbs when they didn't need to. So created this pressure wrap, because you could hold direct pressure, and if you keep pulling it tighter and tighter and tighter, it'll cause arterial occlusion.
Mm-hmm.
A tourniquet if you need to. But people are missing the whole hold pressure over the wound thing first, and they're just going straight to tourniquets. So we have this whole initiative on the nonprofit side where we're doing like safety response seminars for free. So we bring them the little wraps, they retail for like $10, and then give them to the SROs and the school nurses, and then teach them together what to do. And then from that, we'll build out a behavioral response program where the nurses and the SROs will be able to manage students that have a behavioral health crisis together. So that will be a new initiative that we're looking at studying and doing some research with. What should we teach? How should we teach it? What's the best way? How does the absorption of information happen for these different age groups? And then does it make a difference? Right.
I think it would be so helpful with special needs kids with autism and things like that, so that you don't get those situations where you have a police presence that come in, they escalate the situation, they usually don't diffuse it, and then they're tasing a child. You got a 6-year-old that's been handcuffed and tased, and very traumatizing to them. And now are you going to ask them to trust that officer ever again?
Yeah. And that we see a lot on the inpatient side when these, behavioral health patients are now being admitted for crisis in the hospital. They don't trust any of the security officers. And they don't trust because they look like a cop, And so one of the restraint systems that we use comes from Doug Melia, who used to work on a cruise ship. He worked on a cruise ship for years and then did executive protection. And, it's literally a whole little city floating there. They have few security and everyone's drunk or on pills. I'm like, that's family trauma. I'm like, that's an ER, Doug. Like, I was like, you just described an ER. So he's like, that's where the restraint development came from. And there's even one where you can put on a pediatric patient. It's like a waistband. And then it has like the little cuffs that go over, and they can even play Xbox. But they just make sure they can't hit anybody. And then they have a thigh restraint where it wraps around the legs, because as long as you have control of the legs, they really aren't going to do a tremendous amount of movement and kicking,
Right.
So it allows people that were formerly in seclusion, because in the UK, they use a lot of seclusion as opposed to chemical restraint. Mm-hmm. So it allows them to come out of seclusion and kind of integrate or do therapy or do different things. And it's great because like they're putting them in the correction system in Lee County, Florida. And I was like, okay, when they start coming into the hospital systems, I really would like to educate clinical, just so they know, they've seen them, they know how to use them, they know how to take them off, whatever. But they're really great because for pediatric mental health, families can use them at home. So they're a good integration. Like, how do we teach PD? How do we teach security? How do we teach nursing to be able to see these restraints and know what to do and how to use them? Because I believe that they're going to become very commonplace, because they definitely are some of the best that I've ever seen, and least restrictive that I've seen.
And that's important, because I want our listeners to understand that when we're talking about restraints, there are reasons to restrain someone. This is not to be used in a punitive way because, you're mad because they're acting out. This is to keep them safe and to keep you safe. Yes. That's what they're there for.
I have a child with autism. And so people don't understand when they don't have children with special needs. My child, is not to the point where I would need to use any of those interventions. But there are many times where he does cross into my physical space because he just doesn't understand social cues and barriers. And now that he's 10, he's as big as me. And like, he can come and tap me, because he's excited and he's stimming and it hurts, and I have to tell him, you're hitting me too hard. You're hitting me too hard. And so people, if you have a child that has, different cognitive function than that, it can be very, very challenging and terrifying, because nobody wants to put their kid in some scary restraint, Right. And so if it looks a little bit better, if it's a little bit more comfortable, if it's something that, almost looks like you have a belt on and you're wearing a bracelet, that's much better than the alternatives that are out there currently. And I hope he is very successful here.
That would be very fascinating to hear about, because I come from the days when we used to have the vest restraints and then the wrist restraints. And of course, again, I'm psychiatric, so I've actually seen leather restraints in use.
I'll have to send you as one sheet, because they're really, really good, really great.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I always look for ways that we can keep the patient's dignity, but also keep everyone safe.
Right.
And that's what people need to hear. And maybe even using some of those restraints in long-term care might be of benefit if it keeps someone safe. Again, It's not to be used for staff convenience. We just want to keep you in one spot long enough to do things. But really, if it's a safety issue, and having been with a different variety of clients, because one of my buildings took a lot of developmentally disabled individuals in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. That's
And
a tough population to work with, especially the biting. Isn't the biting pretty bad? There's a company we use called Bite Pro, and it like keeps you from breaking the skin, but that still hurts.
yeah, the biting. I had one resident that would not keep any clothing on at all.
You know
So
what I say all the time? I'm like, okay, we know that humans have human behavior, right?
mhm,
Nobody's going to grow wings and fly away. Nobody's going to disappear.
yes,
But the human behavior can be disorganized. Like
yes,
you take your clothes off before you get in the shower, right?
hmm,
But she was taking her clothes off just randomly. So it's not the behavior that's the problem, it's the order of the behavior. And that's what we
yes,
can do as clinicians to try and help reorder behavior.
yes. Well, for this particular client, he did not like the sensation of anything touching him,
Oh yeah.
anything,
Yeah,
and so
that's
we had to care plan all of that um, to allow him to be in his room on the mat because he was nonverbal,
oh.
blind, pretty much deaf, and didn't wear clothes. So it had to all be care plan on how to care for this individual.
I bet. I bet. And you know what? As a caregiver, it's hard. Like you feel
Hmm.
like I wish I could connect like this poor person. Like and I can't really even be there with him because
Yes.
of the issues that you do feel for that. And I think
Hmm.
that's the difference between our approach. We have tactical empathy. We have this empathy for people that some other people just don't care. They're like, well, that sounds like their situation.
Exactly. So tell me about that whole transition, though, of coming from bedside nurse to entrepreneur. What made you take that leap?
I got sick of it. Like I really got sick of people telling me there was nothing else we could do. And I was like, well, I'm not just going to sit here and let this continue to happen to my colleagues and to me. And, I was in several events, violent events and different, you know, sexual assault, all kinds of stuff. And I just said, we're going to lose this whole profession if we don't do something about it. And so I started a wellness company. Nobody wanted to do that. We weren't ready for it yet. And then so from there, we did some surveying, found out that safety was an issue. And then I was attacked with a metal mop around the same time. So we just decided to pivot the company and launch Cortex Gold, which stands for Guiding Organizational Leadership to Deliver Safety and Security Solutions at Work. And then from there, we built the nonprofit. So right now I'm doing a lot of speaking, a lot of consulting, a lot of sitting on boards, just making recommendations for workplace violence reduction efforts. And I am loving it, every minute of it. So, and I am so excited to know that you are out there just promoting business and promoting if you have an idea, just do it. Like, just do it. And nobody knows
Yes.
what I don't know what I'm doing. Like, if you ask my boyfriend, I'll go in there and be like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing next. Like, I just don't. You just find people who know more than you. If you're the smartest person at the table in your company, you're at the wrong table. Like I would say that I'm the dumbest person that I work with. I am, and they'll tell you that too. They're like, "Yeah, she's pretty simple."
Well, there's a simplicity and then there's dumbness, and I think the simplicity is the sweet spot, right? If you make it too complicated, you can't replicate it, you can't duplicate it, you can't multiply. And I
Exactly.
think as business owners, we need to remember that simple is best.
Until you get really good. Once you get
Mhm.
really good and you know how to pivot and you know how to brand and you know marketing and the other thing is if you don't know how to sell, you should
Yes.
learn how to market
Yes.
because you're either an excellent marketer or an excellent seller. So I think that that's a really important thing for people. Some of the things that I've enjoyed reading are Measure What Matters Most. It's about Google's OKRs, and I always pick OKRs for my life and my business. And then I really enjoy using the business canvas as a way to build out businesses. So I have a general contracting company. We have a gym. We have an athletic program. We have, there's the nonprofit. I do a lot of stuff because I just don't like to sit still. I don't know.
I'm right there with you. Everybody asked me, well, wait, what aren't you doing? And I said, well, I haven't yet taken flying lessons, but that
I know
may
I
come
want to
one
fly
day.
a plane. I want to be,
Yeah.
my Gary V like ultimate goal thing is to sponsor a rocket, one of Elon's rockets. I want a Cortex Gold rocket. So to Mars or something. I'm going to put a dog on Mars.
There you go.
But thank you so much for having me on. It has been absolutely wonderful. And I think that we need more of these type of podcasts. We need more of things to help nurses and resources to help nurses, because we do have great ideas and we shouldn't limit ourselves.
Definitely, definitely. So we've talked about a lot. How would someone get in contact with you if they wanted to find out more about what you're doing, or maybe there's an organization out there that needs your help in decreasing workplace violence? How can they reach out to you?
So on LinkedIn, anybody can message me anytime. You can follow me on Mel Cortez, RN on LinkedIn. Also, just go to my website, cortexgold.com. There's plenty of links there, booking links, donation links to help support Tact Book, that nonprofit. And there's lots of opportunities. And consults for nurses, like nursing leaders, are always free. I do not charge for that. So you can call me anytime you need some advice or something, and security officers, they're always free to ask me questions. Give me a call. I'm happy to help in any way.
All right. Well, there you have it. I want to thank you for being here. We are here with Mel Cortez, and you can check out her website, Cortex Gold.
Cortex Gold. Yep.
Cortex Gold. Thank you. And thank you for being here. This is Tina Baxter with the Nurse Shark Academy. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so that you'll know when our next videos come out. And then also follow us on Podbean. And for those of you that are interested in podcasting, you can certainly get our affiliate link and learn more about podcasting through Podbean. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Nurses, are you burnt out, frustrated, looking for something new? Are you looking for more? Nurses, are you ready to feel the sun? You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Your nursing license is your key to freedom. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at the nursesharkacademy.biz today. Thank you for listening to the Nurse Shark Academy show wherever you get your podcasts or watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you'll know when all of our episodes come out. If you want further information, you can contact us on the nursesharkacademy.biz.